Hello and welcome to the IndyCar Addicted Podcast special Indy 500 edition. This is the Monday before the Indianapolis 500 and we thought we'd get together for a kind of special podcast and just get to talking about the previews for the race. And also one of the main things we wanted to focus on are some of our most favorite moments that happened through the history of Indianapolis Motor Speedway. As always, I am Brenan Conroy and with me is Thomas Hughes. Thomas, how are you?
I'm doing great, Brenan. I'm very excited. It's race week. Memorial Day weekend is upon us. That Sunday, busiest and the funnest day of the year for all race fans. It's going to be a blast.
Oh yeah, crazy day. This will probably be the first time I've watched the Monaco Grand Prix in a parking lot, but I'm probably going to be doing that in the parking lot of IMS this Memorial Day. Because I don't want to miss
on network television, too. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it will be a lot of fun. And then it'll go probably Monaco Grand Prix in the morning, Indianapolis 500 live, and then Coca-Cola 600 in the hotel room. It'll be just a lot of fun, and I cannot wait for Memorial Day.
That's right. Champagne brunch at Monaco on the Peacock. Yeah. Then at 11 a.m., got Indy 500 on ABC. Then in the evening, the Coca-Cola 600 on Fox. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It will. So what order did you want to tackle everything today for the podcast? Because you were kind of the driving force behind wanting to do this Indy 500 spectacular.
Yeah, I wanted to really share between not the two of us, but to you all, what were the moments? What was that moment to both Brenan and myself that really brought us in, hooked us in, where we really became fascinated by this spectacle known as the Indy 500. What was that moment, those moments that will live with us forever?
Okay, yeah, I can go along with that. Did you want me to start out, or did you want to go with yours first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'll go first, that's cool. With me, I remember growing up in Illinois, I was primarily a NASCAR fan. I was introduced to the sport of auto racing on Valentine's Day 1999 when I was 7 years old. It was the first race. I'd always loved cars when I was growing up. I always loved it. My favorite movie growing up was The Love Bug.
Yes.
And over time, my Matchbox cars, my Hot Wheels cars, being able to mess around with that. And then I was at my neighbor's house on Valentine's Day 1999, and he had the Daytona 500 playing on CBS, watching Jeff Gordon win his second Daytona 500.
Oh, cool.
It was just an incredible moment for me seeing that happen. Over time, I really loved stock car racing. And then it was 2001 when I really started to divulge the wonderful aura that is auto racing. And then my stepdad, the year progressed, and then May came around. And my stepdad said, well, come on, we're going to watch the Indy 500. Tony Stewart's racing in it this year. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we turned on the telecast.
It was one of the years he was doing the double.
It was a second of 2 attempts to date at the double. So we turned on the telecast. It was the Howard Cosell ABC Wild World of Sports intro. And then from there, fade to black. And then it fade up. You saw the Borg Warner Trophy. The Delta Force theme started to play in the background. And you saw classic Indy 500 clips. It gives me chills right now just thinking about it.
Ooh.
The classic Indy 500 clips. And then Al Michaels beginning the voiceover saying, when you win the Indianapolis 500, it changes your life forever. And then Mario Andretti comes out from the shadows and says, Mario Andretti, 1969, my life has never been the same since I won the Indianapolis 500. That intro continued talking about the legends like Gordon Johncock, 1982, and so on and so forth. A.J. Foyt, the only 5-time winners, owner, and driver. And then the stories of the race were told in that intro. Like Al Michaels said, local favorite Tony Stewart makes his return. And then Michael Andretti comes back to Indy. The Penske team is back, and so on and so forth. And then the intro ended, cut to Al Michaels on pit road from his set. And he was talking about, and he did bring up the split, the open wheel split. But he was said, but this today, at least for one day, we live in relative harmony. Seeing Team Green, seeing Team Penske, seeing them all back at Indianapolis, even if it is only for one day. And then the race itself, seeing Tony Stewart drive for Chip Ganassi, seeing the race go on as it did. And then, of course, seeing Helio Castroneves win his first Indianapolis 500 was truly a moment that I'll never forget. And then at the end of the race, seeing the ABC showing the helicopter that would take Tony Stewart to the airport where he would fly to Charlotte to race the 600 miles. To date, he is the only person to compete the full 1,100 miles. 500 in Indianapolis, 600 in Charlotte. That was the first moment for me that really not only introduced me to open wheel racing, but that was the first moment for me to show what Memorial Day Sunday is all about for a racing fan.
That's a really, really awesome story. I wish mine was that dramatic and fascinating. As for mine, I kind of started out the same way as you. I've always been a car nerd, like my whole life, like ever since I was... You probably did this too. When I was 5 years old, I would walk down a parking lot, but instead of walking down like the normal, like wide lanes of the parking lot, I would walk in the middle where the line is between a parking spot, just so I could go through and name all of the brands of cars that I was walking by.
That is awesome. That's
I was doing that at like 5 and 6 years old. It took me...
I love it.
It surprisingly took me a very long time to get into motorsports. Like when I was like 10, 11, I wasn't that horribly into auto racing. The first memory I have of watching an auto race was when I was 11 years old in 2007, watching the Canadian Grand Prix on Fox then. Yeah, because Speed had the rights. Oh no, sorry, it was the 2008 Canadian Grand Prix and I was 12. And what happened was Lewis Hamilton was coming up behind Kimi Räikkönen in the pit lane. And at that time, they had rules where if you went in under a safety car, you had to go to the back of the field regardless and wait until the last car had passed. And Lewis Hamilton was not looking and completely steamrolled into the back of Kimi Räikkönen's Ferrari and took them both out of the race.
Oh, no.
I saw that and was like, now this is an interesting thing. Let's keep watching it. And then that ended up turning out to be one of the biggest upset races in the history of the Canadian Grand Prix. Because at the end of it, it was a first-time winner, and so far, and pretty much for the future, will probably be only-time winner, Robert Kubica, driving for BMW Sauber, ended up winning the race. And I think it was the following year, he ended up having a really, really, really scary crash at turn 14, I think, of Circuit Villeneuve, which scared him off that place forevermore. He never really performed well at Canada after that. And then 2 years after that, in February 2012, had an accident in a rally car that messed up his wrist so much that he could never drive again. So that would end up being one of the biggest upset races in Formula One history, and that kind of got me into auto racing. Formula One at first, but because Formula One races are almost always on at 7 in the morning, I was trying to look for something else to watch, and NASCAR never managed to grab me, at least until a year or two ago when I started watching that too. So I was looking around for what to watch and was like, oh, this will be interesting. What's this series that looks kind of like Formula One, but they go really fast on ovals? IndyCar. And the first IndyCar race I ended up watching was 2008 Chicagoland, which, if anyone has seen that race, you know that's the race where Scott Dixon won the championship, but Helio Castroneves won the race by 1/1000th of a second past Dixon.
And it was Vince Welch that broke the news to him in
Yeah.
saying he was interviewing for his second place run, and he said, Helio, you are the winner of the race.
And you could see the grin just come across his face like, what just happened? Yes!
Exactly.
So, following that, the first Indianapolis 500 I ended up watching flag to flag would be quite a tumultuous Indy 500, but boy, it was one that would end up pulling me in. It was the 2009 Indy 500, which was emotional for a huge reason for Helio, because earlier in that year, he had been charged with tax fraud and conspiracy. And
that's right.
Through that actually ended up giving Will Power his big break, was the fact that Helio had to take off for the St. Petersburg race because he had to go defend himself in trial in Miami. And it was announced, I think in April, that he was found not guilty of charges. And that just made what happened that May all the more special because Elio would end up taking pole in that race. He ended up leading 66 laps and then ended up winning his third Indianapolis 500, winning it from the pole. And it was just an overall emotional day because how things change in the span of about 2.5 months, that you're defending yourself in a federal trial, and then now you're right back in. You've won your third Indianapolis 500 in a span of only about 8 years. So that was kind of what hooked me, was just the whole emotional story of Elio. What could have happened never kept him down. And just,
that's right.
And in a way, almost drove him more to go where he could, to win the race as hard as he could, and he did that brilliantly. It was just, oh boy.
Yeah. Over time for me, I didn't watch the entire Indy 500 telecast in the next couple years, but it was 2004, in the weeks building up to the Indy 500. I just moved to Houston in that time frame, and I was watching one night, and they had a special coverage on an ESPN Classic. It was their big ticket presentation, they called it, and it was of the 1982 race. And watching that race, I mean, I've seen closer and more exciting finishes before then in multiple racing series, but seeing that finish and understanding how important that race was to Indy, if you think about it, I don't know if this is a fair comparison or not, but 1982 to Indy, I feel, was the 1979 Daytona 500 was to NASCAR, I feel. And I say that because of how exciting, because before then, the closest finish that a driver had to the winner was, I believe, 2 seconds at the very least. But seeing that dramatic comeback that Rick Mears was getting to Gordon Johncock was absolutely phenomenal.
It was, and it almost looked like that Rick Mears would take it from that last bit.
Right. It was really close. I mean, and Jim McKay, God rest his soul, even said during the post show that even though we may have been over dramatic on calling the finish, but it was, you cannot deny how exciting it was, and he was right.
Oh yeah, that was an absolutely crazy and exciting race. And
yeah,
in a way, it was also one heck of an interesting race for looking back on it, who were rookies in that race, because if you look back on that race, that was the first race that we would see drivers such as Bobby Rahal. That was his first race. That would be Danny Sullivan's first race. And then a little known guy, I wonder if you've ever heard of him, his name's Chip Ganassi. That was his first race.
That's right.
And they would finish quietly, but there was plenty more to come from all three of those, as you obviously know.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It was that race. I mean, from the crash in the opening before the start of the race, and IndyCar truly did the right thing that day by not allowing. I mean, I hate it for Kogan, for Mario, and all that were involved in that opening crash, but they did the right thing by not allowing them to continue.
I think so too. Yeah, because you look at it and they were right in that the race was on its way to starting. They didn't want to delay it. I say they were correct, as you obviously believe as well.
Absolutely. But yeah, that race, the importance of that event really sets the stage for what the Indy 500 truly means.
I think so too. Just a hard-nosed, cutthroat. This is the race. You get no second shot. You've gotten all month to try it out and do what you can do. Now it's here. Now it's time. Go do what you can.
That's right. And then, of course,
it's emotional for you, isn't it?
What's up?
Oh, it sounds like it's getting emotional for you over there.
It's still, and just when you really think about it, with just how much the sport of auto racing, when you really think back about what really brought you to love it, it just really makes you grateful.
It really does, yeah.
Okay, let's see. Moving on before I let my mascara run.
Yeah.
Let's see. Moving on, and of course, that year, I said to myself, I'm going to watch the full 1,100 miles. I kept telling my parents I'm going to watch the full 1,100 miles, and then of course that year was the year it rained.
Oh yeah.
Was the year it rained when Buddy Rice won that year, and unfortunately, it was the last television broadcast that Paul Page called. And of course, we didn't know it at the time. But seeing David Letterman, when you watch the post-race interview, it was really emotional for him because he was a diehard IndyCar fan even before we got him into owning co-owning Bobby Rahal's team.
Well, yeah, any race like that, especially seeing a team like Rahal, what they put into it, it was amazing for them.
That's right. And seeing that happen, and of course the following year was the birth of Danica Mania. That whole weekend, I mean, she came so close. I remember I was back home in Peoria for my cousin's wedding, and that Sunday I was watching her and Todd Harris going crazy for Danica in the ABC booth, and seeing her she was so close
and
to getting it, but she had to pit for fuel.
Yeah, to see it all slip away because of fuel mileage. That was just rough.
Yeah, it was still cool though. It was still cool for Dan Weldon and that line. I can't think of who was on. I think it was Rick DeBrule on pit road that told him that said Dan Weldon, welcome to immortality. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. That moment was really cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's really cool to see.
My next moment would be all the way really in 2011. I don't remember much of the 2010 Indianapolis 500, but I know we talked a lot about it, and obviously a lot of people will have remembered it because of what transpired in that race, but 2011 was the next Indy 500 that really made a mark on me, because if you look back on it, that was a day when there was a lot of stuff that kind of didn't work out in the race's favor. A lot of the practice was rained out. Bump day was rained out. They only got 3 days of practice, and then Carb Day was the 27th. The 28th was the parade, and then Indy 500 was the following day. You got a total of 3 or 4 days of practice to just get thrust in and say, okay, we're going. Let's see what you can do now. So that's what started to make it a weird race. For someone like me, as we have mentioned previously, I'm a huge Takuma Sato fan from Formula One. So to see him already come in and be the top qualifier outside of Bump Day, 10th spot, that was huge for me. Of course, it wasn't that nice to see him be the first retiree from the race, but yeah, all said and done. And then to see someone like Tagliani get the first pole for Sam Schmidt, and then also he was a relatively young racer at that time, get the pole for himself too. That was one where pretty much everyone who was watching closely at that time probably looked at it and thought, wow, this is really amazing. He has a real chance to do some stuff here. I wonder what he can pull out. And then seeing the race start to go as it did, I mean, obviously Dario Franchitti was doing really well. Oriol Servia was doing really well. Tagliani was staying at the top of the field. Of course, we saw Howard and Hinchcliffe would crash. The lead was switching a ton in the middle of the race. And then Tagliani had to go into the pits about 150 because he smacked the wall.
That's right.
Penske really didn't have its day. Ryan Briscoe crashed, and then coming into 164 was when a lot of people thought that would be the last pit stop because everyone was thinking they could make it on one last stop of fuel. Numerous among those who waited a few extra laps were Dario Franchitti, and then a rookie we'll come to know later on in this race. Graham Rahal was the one who would end up taking the race for 6 laps and then losing it to Dixon, who then had to pit for fuel. This is something that was going to make another set of appearances because then we would see Tony Kanaan take the lead, then have to go get fuel. Then we saw Danica take the lead and have to go take fuel. And then we saw a guy who I had never heard of, and I think I said it earlier, I thought he had a fake name, Bertrand Baguette, driving for Rahal when they were only running one car. And he had to come pit at lap 196. And it was amazing because he was running quick. Everyone watching was like, does he have a lot of fuel or something? Because he might win this. He's running 211, 212. But then, no, he had to go pit at lap 196. Dan Weldon was charging, but he had pitted, so no one really thought he had much of a shot. Baguette pitted. Franchitti was going very, very slow because he was wanting to conserve fuel. And then backstretch of lap 198, J.R. Hildebrand, a rookie driving for Panther Racing, takes the lead. Everyone was going, "Who is this? We've never heard of this guy. We know Panther Racing, but who is this kid?" And he was doing really well. It was the 100th anniversary of the first Indianapolis 500. It was a car sponsored by the U.S. National Guard. And this was about to be one of the most emotional wins already without anything more happening, just because it's a rookie winning the 100th anniversary race. Everyone thought maybe Franchitti's going to come back. No, he was going 201s while Hildebrand was doing 212s to 216 laps. White flag takes, the whole crowd erupts in happiness. They're cheering.
Biggest pop I've ever heard. Biggest pop I've ever heard at Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
That whole place was just applauding. The whole track, all 250. In fact, I think with standing room tickets, at least according to what I found, it was 300,000 plus people who were just cheering this kid on. Final 2.5 miles. Goes through turn 1, turn 2, nothing in sight. Turn 3, the race is being called as his and his alone. Comes out of turn 3, he sees Charlie Kimball, who is about a lap down at that point. He was making his own way in it in 13th, having just made his comeback. It was his rookie race, coming back from having to stop his racing career in Europe because of his type 1 diabetes diagnosis, but they figured out a way to make it work. So he was passing Kimball on the outside, thinking, "Mate, I'll just pass him and take it easy." He ran it a bit wide and ran it into the outside wall of turn 4. And he was still going and still going fast. Everyone thought that he was actually going to be able... Actually, I wonder, because I at least thought when I was watching it, the way he was sliding, he actually had a way to cross the line wrecked, which would have made the old Colin Chapman line that I've always thought was funny, that a perfect race car collapses in a perfect pile of steam just as it crosses the checkered flag. I thought that was actually about to come true in the Indianapolis 500, but come zooming from behind, we have a driver who had won the Indianapolis 500 in 2005, but had had bad luck with teams, had just recently got fired from Panther Racing the previous year, and had come back in a single car operation, either the first or the second time it had ever won, by a former teammate of his, Brian Herta, and Dan Weldon took the lead and won his second Indianapolis 500. And the whole crowd, it was a cross of cheers and total confusion. There was no mistaking, though, the voice that we heard on the other side of that radio, pitch high and just going absolutely nuts, and probably some of it in astonishment off of what he just actually did. No one was expecting him to win, because he was pretty far back when the final caution came up at 161. And the final caution had come up at 161. He was pretty far back. He came all the way back, won it. He was cheering, and we saw J.R. Hildebrand's car slide off the wall and just onto the inside of turn 1, where it would rest there for just a long while. It would just be a moment where he stepped out, waved to the crowd, and they cheered him almost as loudly as that final lap, just because of what he had done and how cruelly it had been taken away from him. And that's one of those scenes that, if they had a picture of it, I've never been able to find one, it would have just been amazing to see the cheers and cheers and cheers of Dan Weldon winning his second Indy 500 in the most unlikely of situation. And then you see the heartbreak of a fresh-faced rookie who had almost just taken the biggest win possible in the series and just had it yanked away from him. And that was the moment number 2 that kind of cemented it as IndyCar's for me. IndyCar is just mine. And then, of course, with what happened with Dan Weldon later that year, it's all that more emotional to think back on it, to think how soon it happened, and how that was... It's almost, if it was pre-planned, it was almost like, let me get one last in, and what a last it was.
Wow. I'm emotional just thinking about it.
It's incredibly emotional for me to think back to it.
Yeah. Oh, man. Where do you go from there, right?
It's hard to go further from there, and that's what made the 100th anniversary race so special. It's because we look back on it Now, not even thinking that it was the 100th anniversary race, we think back on it just as the most ridiculous race that we ever saw.
That's right. Just looking back at how much that race, like 82, that race, and just shows you just how respected and fearless these drivers really are.
The fact that you have to hold your foot flat going 225 to 230 miles an hour around each of those 4 square corners on that track, and you pretty much just have to keep it flat. You can't lift, you can't adjust, you can't do anything. Just hold on for dear life and hope it sticks.
That's right. So that's a good lead into what we can really expect for the Indy 500 this year. I mean, it's the 2011 was truly the 100th anniversary of the race, and this year is the 100th running.
Right.
Think of all the build up. I mean, not just specifically with
it being the 100th running of the race, but
right,
everything.
But I mean, think about James Hinchcliffe. That story in itself.
That's the big story for me for the race, because we look at that has the potential to just be the biggest thing possible. We have a guy who had his own very, very emotional accident happen last year. He lost 15 pints of blood on his way to Indianapolis Methodist Hospital and has come back the next year and put his car on the pole going nearly 231 miles an hour. To have a driver with that kind of courage is just amazing. We'll have to see what he can do with the starting spot, but if you go by that, it's just amazing to see what has happened, and I'm incredibly confident. I bet you he can turn this in to an amazing finish, if not a very, very emotional win.
Don't ever say that auto racers from any form of competitive auto racing, don't ever say that they're not athletes.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, people say it was Donovan McNabb on Fox Sports Live that made the comment that auto racers aren't athletes. When people say that, I think of James Hinchcliffe and what all he went through. I think of Ricky Rudd at Martinsville, 1998, when he drove the fall Martinsville race with no air conditioning in that car.
I remember that a bit too, and he was like, it was hard for him to get himself out of that car.
Yeah, he needed help out of that car. He needed water. He needed oxygen.
Yeah.
After that race, and then of course, for getting back, when you think of drivers who aren't athletes, I think of Buddy Lazier winning the Indy 500 in 1996 with a broken back.
One of the biggest ones I think of is Ayrton Senna in the 1991 Brazilian Grand Prix. The transmission stuck in 6th gear, and also the power steering on the car failed, and he ended up winning the race, stopped on the backstretch, and had to be taken out of the car, and he was having muscle spasms, just having to be pulled out and stretchered back to the pits where he could recover for a second and then go and take the podium.
Yeah, as he was walking to the podium, people were congratulating him, and he told, "Don't touch me, don't touch me." He needed to really relax after that one.
Yeah, because he was in such intense physical pain.
Absolutely.
It's almost anymore that the world of auto racing is almost a thankless one, because we see other athletes try to diminish the accomplishments that these athletes do, and it's sad because auto racers can do some of the most amazing physical feats ever and will be told, oh, it's the car that's doing it.
That's right. Sam Posey, one year he was doing a special, I think it was his son. He was walking into turn 1 with his son in a segment talking about AJ Foyt, and he made the comment that back when the driver was more important than the car, and then he led into the segment with AJ Foyt. It just really makes you appreciative of everything that these drivers do and all that they go through. They risk their lives. This isn't a 9-to-5 job for them. They risk their lives to win races and to grasp eternal glory and capture that trophy, whether it be the Borg Warner Cup, the Astor Cup, whatever major prize it is.
And it's crazy to think that we are in one of the safest times in the history of auto racing, and we still see major injuries that come of it. All three
right.
major motor racing series have had serious injuries. Jules Bianchi in Formula One, he died because of his accident in the 2014 Japanese Grand Prix. We saw Kyle Busch break his leg in the 2015 Daytona 500, and then the 2015 Indianapolis 500, in practice, we ended up seeing James Hinchcliffe have his accident, and then it's still sad to bring up, but Justin Wilson in the 2015 Pocono race.
That's right. But think about how incredible of a story that would be if James Hinchcliffe were to somehow pull this off.
If he did that, I think he would be very eager to have it honor everyone who has been injured in some way, or maybe even worse, in a race car, because he came out of his and then just did about the most spectacular thing you could have possibly done.
That's right. Thinking about the rest of the field, even though Hinch is truly the story of the month of May and this week, truly this could be, like, based on practice speeds and whatnot, this could be another chance for an American driver to really come into their own and put their face on the Borg Warner Trophy once again.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have second, third, and fourth are all American drivers, with Joseph Newgarden, Ryan Hunter-Reay, and Townsend Bell, each in different stages of their careers as well. In 11th, we have a rookie in Alexander Rossi, who's in a great position for himself. We have Marco Andretti, we have J.R. Hildebrand, we have Charlie Kimball, and Ed Carpenter all in the top 20. And interesting little tidbit and a good side for Rossi, Marco, JR, and Charlie Kimball, since the Dallara DW12 has been made as the car, every single Indianapolis winner has come from 11th to 18th spot.
That's right. And it's incredible, like you start in the middle, you got the best chance to win the race.
Yeah, it's weird to think, because it always was in the past that you would have the best shot to win Indianapolis if you're on the front. In 2009, it was 44 of the winners of the 93 races started on the front row, the front three. And now we're starting to see so many drivers come from the second row was in 2010, and then the third, the fourth, the fifth row have started to come into play for major chances to win in the last 5 years.
That's right. It's all about strategy.
It is all about strategy. A
perfect example of this would be Jacques Villeneuve in 1995. You got that 2-lap penalty, and Team Green, they came up with that strategy to get on the lead lap, and then he got back on the lead lap, and then he said, okay, let's just worry about finishing in points, and we'll go on to next week. But then he got closer, and then he got a chance at the podium, which would have been an incredible comeback in itself. Then, of course, Scott Goodyear had his penalty, and that ended up becoming the greatest Indy 500 comeback in history. And then, of course, that was the race that got him his Formula One ride with Williams.
Because it was just such a spectacular sight to see a driver like Villeneuve take the race by such a hand and complete not just 200 laps, but 202 laps of the Indianapolis circuit. Yeah.
That's right. Barry Green said it all. He said when he was being interviewed by Jack Arute, saying, "Can't believe it, we just won the first 505-mile race."
Yeah.
Oh man. Then talking, I think as far as American drivers, Joseph Newgarden and Townsend Bell especially, they both took qualifying by storm.
I have to say, even though a lot of people probably aren't, I have Townsend Bell as my kind of pick for the win, because he is a guy who has been in some of the lesser rides over the last few years. Like, he has been with some teams that are not necessarily up to scruff with where he might want to be going for him. Like, he was with Dreyer and Reinbold last year. With 2014, he was with KV, which are decent teams, but not in a position like he's with right now, with Andretti Autosport, with two other cars from his team, one right beside him in the middle of row 2 with Carlos Munoz, and then the other on the front row with Ryan Hunter-Reay. He's in a really good position to take this and finally do what he's been wanting for so long and has never had the possibility to do throughout his whole IndyCar career.
That's right.
That's why I think he has a really good shot at it, because he's finally got the possibilities. And he seems to me like a driver who can finally go ahead and take it.
Yeah, that'd be an incredible story. I mean, he races in multiple series, and he does commentary on the sister network, NBC Sports.
Right.
And think about it. I mean, he wins the race. I mean, look at Dan Weldon. He did the same thing for what was then known as Versus. He won the Indy 500, and he did television commentary for the other network. That'd be an incredible story, that an American racer like that, especially Joseph Newgarden, who will roll off the field in the middle of row 1 on Sunday. That whole ordeal, seeing Joseph Newgarden roll off the field in the middle of row 1 on Sunday, is the type of American racer that IndyCar truly needs. I think,
To me, he's the IndyCar racer of the future, because he's likable, he's good looking, he's a happy, good, amazing racer who's kind to everyone, and as we can see, he can really drive. He's going to be He's going to be one of those that I think will help bring IndyCar somewhere else, because he is a great, great, great face for the series going forward.
Absolutely. You think of the names that made IndyCar famous, and now it's the names of this generation, like Will Power, like Graham Rahal, like Joseph Newgarden. They really will help propel this series to the future.
And I think they're doing a fantastic job of it.
Absolutely. If Joseph Newgarden were to win on Sunday, that'd be an incredible day, and he would be if you didn't know him before, you would definitely know him then.
Oh yeah. I believe he has a real shot to make himself here this year. He already did a great job at making his name last year, pulling in a position for not really that great of a shot, but coming 7th in the championship, getting 2 wins. If he takes this opportunity properly, he has a chance to really write his name in the record books. And all while he's barely 25.
That's right, and he's got a bright future ahead of him. He's got the talent. He really does. Even though he needed a miracle, he was one of the 6 competitors for the Astor Cup last August in Sonoma.
And that's what I think was most amazing. He was in a position where he didn't have top equipment, and from my position as a fan, had a pit crew that seemed to more often be working against him than with him, but was just taking that car and doing everything he possibly could with it, pulling out wins at Alabama and then at Toronto. And getting a 1-2 at Toronto with his teammate Luca Filippi. It was just amazing to watch, and I think that was the charge that he needs to go forward and will do probably very, very well with.
Every year when I make Indy 500 picks, there are 3 picks I typically do. I do an American pick, I do a foreign pick, and I do an out-of-nowhere pick. Talking about, besides the incredible story that is James Hinchcliffe, based on practice speeds, how about Carlos Munoz in the 26 car?
I like him as a driver. I think he's crazy good as a driver. My lasting memory for Munoz was always, I think it was 2013 at Fontana, watching him run the low line and being so ridiculously impressive as a replacement for EJ Viso. That was his break into the IndyCar series, and everyone was watching going, what in the world is he doing? This is amazing. I worry that that kind of driving might not make it where he can last a whole lot long. Like, he has an amazing ability for driving, but I worry that he might not be able to make the car last long enough to go the whole distance, though I've been proven wrong with that kind of theory several times before, and he's perfectly welcome to prove that wrong to me again, because he's really good and I like him.
Yeah, his Indy Lights career really set him off. He just really needs to get that backing, and Andretti, thankfully so, kept him on, and he got that first career win in Detroit last year. But with his practice speeds this year, he could really be one of the top foreign guys in the race.
I have a pick for an out-of-nowhere foreign guy, and I wanted to see what you thought of it. I really like the look of Mikhail Aleshin coming into this race. He has a whole story, like just in the last few years, that has fascinated me with how 2014, he had his awful wreck in Fontana, what would turn out to be the last night race at Fontana. and he had to be in the hospital for quite a long time. And then 2015 comes around. It looks like he's coming back to IndyCar with Sam Schmidt and is going to come back for his second go at it. The Russian sanctions make it where his sponsors couldn't help him out, and he had nowhere to go. So this is almost a second rookie season for Aleshin. And then we come in to the Indianapolis 500 qualifying, and he does really, really, really well. He comes 7th in the initial Fast 9 qualifiers, and then he came 7th again in this Fast 9. And then on Saturday, one of the things I know I mentioned to you was just the amazement at how he was able to hold on to the car as it was four-wheel drifting through turn 1. That level of car control is something that makes me look at it and think, oh, wow, I think he really might have a shot to win this. If you can hold your car when it comes to times of terror, that's a really good sign that you can make your stuff last all the way through 500 miles.
That's right. That would be, I mean, think of these types of stories. These are the stories that make drivers, that really make the Indianapolis 500 what it truly is and how special it really is to us.
And then, of course, there's one other benefit of Aleshin winning.
What's that?
We would all get to see Track Forum just go up in flames and just gather around that beautiful fire and sing Kumbaya.
Indeed. Oh, man. All right. Last thing, short answer. I want to see, in your opinion, all I need is the year. Best Indianapolis 500 in history.
2011. No shot. No chance of anything else. It's 2011.
With me, 1982.
I can see that, especially with how it holds such an emotional part for you. And actually, looking at it, both of these races, for what we think of as the best Indy 500, they both hold a major part in our history of watching the Indy 500.
That's right. Think about, and if it was not 82, 2011 would most likely come in a close second.
Not 82 or 2011, 1992 probably.
No, oh, absolutely. That was a great one.
Yeah, 1992 was just outstanding to watch.
Yeah, seeing that whole build up, and then of course the last 15 laps was an incredible story in itself.
Seeing the man who had dominated the race go out with engine troubles, and then seeing that final dash to the finish between Al Unser Jr. and Scott Goodyear, and it just being so close for Scott Goodyear, but just didn't get it.
Starting dead last, and for him to come back and finish second like that was incredible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then of course Al Unser Jr. in Victory Lane. That line, you just don't know what Indy means. And ABC Sports put that in their opening vignette for many several years after that.
Because it is almost true. We don't know what Indy means. We're not the ones risking our lives out on that track for that trophy. We don't know it because we've just never experienced it.
That's right. These guys, they're gladiators. They're warriors. They're racers. They risk it all for the glory, for the fans, and to win. And I respect the heck out of them for doing so.
As do I. Thanks for listening to us talk about these parts of our history. This race has just meant so much to us in the history of what we enjoy and just going forward for us. As you can obviously tell, we were very, very, very emotional about everything we talked about because it just means so much to us. We thank all of you for listening, and we hope you have a great Indianapolis 500, and we hope you enjoy it. We hope you enjoy the 100th running of this fantastic race.
Take care, folks. Be safe. Have a fun Memorial Day Sunday.
I will see you guys from Indianapolis, and we'll see you back as soon as possible.